Thank you for tuning into the first webinar hosted by the University Hall Gallery, produced in collaboration with the Asian American Studies program here at UMass Boston. I'm Sam Toabe, the gallery director and curator of Dot Now, the exhibition that this program stems from. Dot Now is a group exhibition that presents artworks made by artists living and or working in the neighborhood of Dorchester, Massachusetts. The exhibition seeks to foster a stronger sense of community between artists in the area, UMass Boston, and UMass Boston while celebrating their work within the greater Boston area. Dot Now gathers a set of intergenerational artists who are working in a variety of media connected through their locale and shared social concerns, but distinctive in their artistic practices and personal narratives. Dorchester is the most racially diverse neighborhood in the greater Boston area, which includes a large and diverse Asian American community comprised of residents of predominantly Vietnamese heritage and descent. This includes both recent immigrants as well as first and second generation residents, many of which have family members who emigrated to the US from Vietnam after the fall of Saigon on April 30th, 1975, often referred to as Black April. It is by chance that we organized this rescheduled set of talks to take place on the 45th anniversary of this historic event, and that we are joined here by two artists of Vietnamese descent, whose work at times intersect with the narrative of the Vietnamese diaspora. I hope that these talks today will help to convey the importance of this community in Dorchester, as well as the complexity and pluralities that make up the diverse identities within the Asian American community in our local neighborhood, and the important role that art plays in those communities. I also hope that we will take into consideration the historic moment that we're in right now, in light of the pandemic that we are living through. In this very moment, programs like this can act to help build community and mutual understanding of other cultures and the diverse identities, histories, and current realities of our neighbors. I believe that empathy and engagement will be essential elements in surviving and healing from these challenging times. So thank you all again for participating, especially the artists, the students, my colleagues at UMass Boston and beyond. The University Gallery does not exist without your engagement. So thank you for tuning in and for participating. Tonight's program will consist of introductions by Dr. Chu Lee of the Asian American Studies program, whose class is joining us tonight, followed by artist talks from participating artists of Dot Now, including Ngoc Tran Vu, Khan Ada Nguyen, and Joanna Tam, which will be followed by a Q&A where viewers will be able to write in questions for the artists that Dr. Lee and I will read. If you're tuning in by phone, you can message questions to us at our Facebook account at the handle @UHGallery. And during the talks, I'll be compiling a set of questions that we'll then forward to the artists. This program is supported by the Paul Hayes Tucker Fund, as well as a generous contribution from the Paul and Edith Babson Foundation, and by the Art Department of the College of Liberal Arts in UMass Boston. My co-host is Dr. Chu Lee, who is the instructor of the course Asian Women in the US, which is offered as part of the Asian American Studies program here at UMass Boston. She is committed to promoting equity and social justice for young children, with research interests that include digital literacy, sociocultural aspects of literacy learning for children, and critical perspectives in children's and young adult literature. I'll include the links for the Asian American Studies program in the chat feed, as well as the link for the University Hall Gallery. And with that, I will now turn things over to you, Dr. Lee. Thank you, Professor, for participating in this and for helping really round out the extent of this program and including your students in the talks today.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sam, for the overview and introduction. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited on behalf of the Asian American Studies program to welcome everyone to what is the penultimate class this semester. And what a better way to close the semester but to have three incredible Asian American artists from and in Dorchester to discuss their work with us tonight. The Asian American Studies program, at its core, is committed to the local communities from which our students hail. Thus, our courses are grounded in people's real-life lived experiences. It's always been a priority of the Asian American Studies to create and provide spaces for the stories of people from our local communities and highlight the voices that we don't often hear in the mainstream. Dorchester has always been geographically and culturally significant site to the Asian American Studies program at UMass Boston. with UMass Boston geographically situated in Dorchester and through community ties that have been cultivated since the founding of the Asian American Studies over the past 30 plus years, as many of our students and alums are from this community. And I think we have a couple who will speak to that today. We're happy to continue building on these relationships as we host local Dorchester-based Asian American artists in our Asian Women in the US course tonight. The themes we have explored in this particular course around culture, race, gender, class, family, and health are reflective of our lived realities. However, these themes are not limited to the experiences of Asian women, but are universal issues across many different communities. During this challenging time, thinking about what connects and brings us together is more important than ever. And what is our role as teachers, artists, students, community member in imagining and creating the world that we want to live in? We hope to explore this today as we think about how creative expression, such as art, is one way to express and understand the complex and nuanced experience of being Asian American in the US. Before I introduce the artists, I would like to highlight the fall semester courses in the Asian American Studies program. And I think you could find that listing on the website, which I think Sam had posted in the chat box. Also, if you are already not part of the Asian American Studies program Facebook page, please join or check it out. The Facebook page has a lot of information regarding campus and community issues and resources, especially related to the current COVID-19 challenges, but also relevant to the Asian American Studies more broadly. And that link could be found in the chat box as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our artists. Tonight, we have Ngoc Jong Vu. She's a Vietnamese American interdisciplinary artist and organizer whose socially engaged work draws from her experience as a community organizer, educator, and healer. Oh, wow, I think I just reread that twice in my mind. Tran moves between mediums and materials to work in photography, painting, sculpture, and social practice so that her art can best resonate and engage with its audience intentionally. Born in Vietnam, Tran came to the United States with her family as political refugees and grew up in Boston's Dorchester and South Boston's working class neighborhoods. She received her master's in arts and politics at New York University's Tisch School of Arts and her bachelor's in ethnic studies and visual arts at Brown University. Tran works across borders and is based in Boston's Dorchester community. You can find her website in the chat box. Our next artist is Con Aiden Nguyen. He envisioned a future where all people are liberated from oppression. As a queer Vietnamese American activist, Aiden uses art as a platform to unite and uplift his community. He's founded Vanguard, an international publication, and the Queer Vietnamese Film Festival. His work has been featured in exhibitions throughout the world and recently archived by the Library of Congress. In addition, Aiden has spoken at the U.S. Consulate of Ho Chi Minh City and numerous universities about his activism. And we have Joanna Tam. She is Hong Kong-born, Boston-based visual artist and educator using video, photography, performance, text, and installation. Her works examine the issues of migration, citizenship, standardization, construction of national identity, as well as the notion of home. Joanna is currently a visiting lecturer at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design and a part-time lecturer at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts University. Please give a warm welcome to all of our artists, and we will begin with our first presenter, Tran. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chu, Sam, everyone. Really appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen right now. Oh, it says host disable. Screen sharing. Okay, now it's good. Okay. Okay. Everyone good? Can everyone see this okay? Okay, awesome. Okay, so I wanted to just give I know we have about 15 to 20 minutes to kind of share a bit about our background and practice. So I'm gonna go into the first thing. I definitely want to acknowledge kind of the land and space that we're in, definitely kind of given kind of the context of where we are today. So where we are meeting virtually today is the original homelands of the Mashpee Wampanoag that Aquinnah, Wampanoag, the Nipmuc, and the Massachusetts tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocides and forced removal from this territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people still connected to this land on which we gather. And I always try to start with this whenever I do a presentation, just to acknowledge our connection to the land and the space that we're in. For myself, you know, growing up as, you know, and coming to this this land as political refugee from Vietnam, definitely acknowledging how is it that I've come to be where I am, along with kind of the people that have come before me. And especially in the kind of the context of today of COVID-19, even acknowledging just, you know, all the things that are happening kind of in this country amidst kind of systemic racism, you know, the kind of how different communities are responding to the pandemic differently, and the disparity and kind of all of that that's happening, especially in the African-American Black community, and then also anti-Asian violence are, you know, are still happening because of misread information. So I think, and, you know, just to acknowledge this is kind of the context of which we're operating in daily. So kind of with that, kind of transitioning to a lot of my work and practice is really informed by my roots, kind of my family. So this image is when my family and I, we left, this is at the Saigon International Airport, Tan Son Nhut, in 1992. I'm there in the pink dress. So we came as political refugees because my dad was a part of the war. He was a lieutenant, and we came under the humanitarian operation program. And so that was kind of early in the early 90s, part of the third wave of Vietnamese refugees and the diaspora. So we came in the wave of military kind of members, and my dad was a part of that. And so yeah, I grew up in Boston, working class in Dorchester and Southie, and that really informed just a lot of my worldview, kind of thinking around social inequality at an early age. Why is it that, you know, certain communities or certain families have access to certain resources while others do not? So I think at an early age, I started thinking about that, and that really kind of prompted my route into being an organizer in high school, working around Asian American activism. And actually, I was a part of CAPE, which is, I know, based at UMass Boston. So thinking around, you know, access to our own history, what is, you know, the disinformation, things that we've been taught, and things that, you know, that we haven't been taught. So thinking around that, working with kind of the Dorchester community around voter registration, making sure that communities and families, they, you know, people are able to get registered, their voices heard. So thinking around that kind of, you know, growing up made me, you know, think around how do I kind of showcase kind of all these messages kind of in my work and in the kind of the expression that I want to put forth. And so I also believe that everyone is an artist, and is whether or not we use our creativity, and that art is a human right. I think the kind of the acknowledgement of art and cultural, and thinking around how do we engage our humanity, and then thinking around the possibilities of, you know, of life, thinking around, you know, the messages, thinking around how to fully express ourselves, our culture, our traditions, and bringing that forth into ways that we can resolve existing issues that are ongoing. So kind of a lot of my work explore identity and place, and here are just two examples of, you know, the one on the left, kind of Asian women used this in ink on canvas and oil, and thinking around, and then the one on the right is photograph of Vietnamese women, and this is a, you know, typical kind of event, cultural event that happens often, actually, because of COVID-19. A lot of the Vietnamese community aren't able to gather today to commemorate Black April. So I think a lot of things are happening in different format, but these are the ways that I try to just document just, you know, cultural events, but even just community members coming together, and, you know, kind of with the, you know, the Vietnamese South Republic flag, the three red stripes. So that's always being really present. I think the color kind of yellow, but thinking around my own kind of connection to my own kind of identity and place. So thinking around, you know, the Vietnamese women that still gather, a lot of the men too who reenact especially around anniversaries, around commemoration holidays, as a way to build community. So this is the photograph of my father, and it was the image that's part of the show currently. And so I took it in 2007, and I wanted to kind of, somehow acknowledge kind of how he is today, who he is versus kind of his past too, as a lieutenant. And so we always have, images kind of around the house, but it's oftentimes not just like photographs here and there. And so I wanted to kind of tie that together. And my dad being, just someone that's super influential in my life, kind of growing up, he was, the only, person in our household to work. And so thinking around how his kind of navigating kind of his coming kind of to the US, and also leaving, his own country, and a country that, he fought for, but wasn't successful, and thinking around, how kind of he grew up like so much differently in his goals and his cultural value than what he was, thinking that things were going to be. And so having to kind of adapt to that, and just seeing kind of the transformation between kind of his younger self to who he is today, and how much he's, the times and kind of memories of that. So that was what I wanted to kind of document. And another kind of part of my practice is social engagement. I really believe art, for me, is a way to organize community members, essentially. So this project I did in 2017, it was rooted in community in action, a mural for the Vietnamese people. And I wanted to create a permanent public art right in the community. As some of you may recognize, this it's in front of the Pho Hoa restaurant right in Fields Corner. And I wanted to create art and to plug in a very intergenerational group. The people in front of it is the group of artists, and also community members who were a part of creating this project. And it was really centered around three themes: the Vietnamese cultural narrative, themes of unity, and also hope for a brighter future. I think oftentimes in Dorchester, there's a lot of, stereotypes. The impression that we hear in the news and in media is that it's, a place that's, a lot of, poor and violence written. But what I find is that there's just so much talent in this community, and how do we go about bringing out kind of the voices and really bringing community members together to showcase their own history that really reflects the community. So this project was really built upon kind of a community organizing, where we kind of went door to door, see who wanted to be involved in different way, whether they're an artist or whether they don't have, they don't associate with having an arts background, but figuring out ways that people can plug in. So you can see even on some of the image, I know it's a little far away, but even the image of essentially Lady Liberty, kind of the tree, and kind of she's kind of one of the grounds, and she's actually holding a book that says 1975. And so and you see the mother and son kind of in the foreground, kind of traveling to this land kind of opportunity, and kind of the tree leads up to this kind of globe of kind of the future, the possibility of what, in this case, kind of Boston, but and then the images of the animals, kind of each of them kind of hold a cultural significance. The dragon, which is oftentimes Vietnam is known as the land of the rising dragon. So even see the shape of it in the background with kind of the geography of like kind of northern kind of Sapa, the rice paddies, and even the phoenix kind of rising from the ashes. The fish too, so just a lot of it kind of holds a very kind of cultural significance, but at the same time really tells the story of, of the Vietnamese diaspora, and of kind of coming to this land. So yeah, so I actually with that, so this was a time capsule. So we did this at the basement of Pho Hoa. Fortunately, we were able to kind of partner with them, and so kind of get a sense of the team that were a part of it. So this was over the span of 3 weeks. So just kind of seeing the layout, and we met with community members monthly just to test out some of the themes and images and the narrative that we wanted to be a part of the project. And we really ultimately want this project to be something that the community members were proud of, and that we can also showcase to visitors to share a piece of our history. Yeah, so yeah, that's the piece. But yeah, definitely a really just rewarding experience, and the kind of the narrative that it shows. And to this day, a lot of people still come up just to be like, this is such a powerful way that really makes them feel like they're being seen, like the community members. So as part of that, we have the intergenerational collaboration kind of with the weekly meeting and kind of showcasing some of the images that we were stitching together over the course of 6 months, because we wanted to make sure that it sits well, and that all the images, and that it had the cultural, and that it was accurate too. So we definitely wanted to make sure that with elders there, that it works for them, and also for young people to feel like they can also plug into and have it be really really bilingual too, so that it's accessible for people in Vietnamese and also English as well. So another kind of project that I wanted to highlight is around the family stories, and I did this in 2018, and it was really through kind of using cultural performances, having, kind of the Vietnamese kind of, again, intergenerational audience tell around their lived experience, and oftentimes stories that aren't shared kind of within Vietnamese household and families, stories around, trauma stories. We had one youth, he talked about coming out to his mom, and I was, a little nervous about how that was going to be received in kind of the Vietnamese community. We had around 200 kind of audience member, a lot of elders, and I was really nervous about that, how that was going to be received, especially themes that people aren't even so keen to opening up. And I made sure that it was again in bilingual English and Vietnamese, so that elders and young people could participate, and that there was also social workers on hand to help really hold the space and the conversation, so that people feel like they're safe, and that they can, kind of employ kind of different strategies and how to kind of talk around some of these hard issues. But people were very, receptive. A lot of, people cry from seeing the performances, kind of spoken word, kind of the music that was being shared, and that there was definitely a need after for a lot of audience members to be like, how do we continue more spaces like this, so that individual families can really share stories that they aren't able to open up in their own household. And oftentimes, that I think the inability to kind of communicate within families, I feel like there's a lot of cultural barriers that happen, but also just even the need to really talk around trauma, around mental health. That's definitely something that within the community, Vietnamese community, I mean, I think a lot of, immigrant and refugee community, but definitely finding ways to that, to share spaces so that community can come together. So kind of, I wanted to give like kind of an overview of just kind of the values and kind of vision kind of my work. I often think around, what are the intention, what are my goals in kind of creating a particular kind of artwork, who's the audience, essentially who am I making it for, who am I, what is my primary kind of audience. I think around, the narrative that I'm trying to share, uplifting, what is it that, and oftentimes a lot of my work is kind of really heavily kind of in politics, because I think that's, I think it really intersects with all of our lives, and thinking around what we're taught, how, we grew up, and the things that we want to put forth and what we support. And I try to embed, especially when it's socially engaged project, around just the process of it, like who's really at the table, who's not, and how can I continue to create a space that's more inclusive and accessible. And oftentimes thinking around how does this tie to kind of larger conversations around healing, essentially. Does this, kind of this process, how do we continue to kind of look inward, but then also how do we continue to support one another. And as always, as an artist, I definitely advocate for being paid, and compensated, especially for time and energy. And I think oftentimes the arts and culture aren't as valued, unfortunately. And so thinking around ways that to create work that is sustainable, but that is also really uplifting, and that is accessible for people to plug in. So I think one of the last thing I kind of wanted to talk around was, especially in these times, this is a great quote by Sonia Renee Taylor, spoken word poet. She's the creator of the Body is Not an Apology movement. And she talks a lot about, his quote, we will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than we normalize greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. And I've been thinking a lot about this quote just, during these times of, especially, the need for us to, I feel like, to reckon, to kind of at the status of things, of structures that we're operating in, and the need to pause, to really reflect. Of course, it also reveals a lot of inequity and disparity around people who are able to be inside, versus like frontline workers and communities that are really suffering in different ways. But thinking around this notion of productivity, how do we continue to create because we want to, not because we feel like we have to, and really reimagining way how we gather, thinking around accessibilities. Are the ways that we've been functioning, is that even kind of working? So thinking about kind of the normalization of what we consider was normal before, and kind of using this as an opportunity to create something different for the present as well as the future. And I think thinking around, community-based art kind of engagement, how does this tie into making sure that our community feel like they're being heard, their narrative, and as well as, and a lot of really inspiring, things that are happening around mutual aids, around, I know in Dorchester, community care is happening, where a lot of members, people I'm connected to, they're supporting neighbors, making sure that our most vulnerable residents needs are being met. So thinking around ways that we can support each other through these really difficult time, and continue thinking about ways that we can connect and really build from this in times in ways that that makes sense. I think that might be my last slide. I know there's some question that came up. I don't know if we're waiting for at the end for that.
I think you can answer that now if you like. It's just if your projects are grant funded.
Oh, my project is grant funded. Yes. Well, it depends on the project. Oftentimes, I do look for kind of local kind of funding, kind of in the Boston area, sometimes national, but it is funded. Oftentimes, I don't. I try not to kind of go off of commission and stuff. So a lot of the work that I do is oftentimes not for sale. I mean, if people want to inquire about that, but oftentimes it comes from, foundation, from grants, and sometimes crowdsourcing.
How about that mural that you produced with the community?
Oh yeah, that mural, it was funded by NEFA, New England Foundation for the Arts, and it was part of Creative City project. So yeah, that was funded by them. And I think I did other smaller funding for like the block party. We did like an opening for the block party, and then different signage and everything.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much, Tran. That was a really wonderful talk.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar, and I want to specifically thank Sam and Chiu for hosting this and for having me here. So my presentation today is going to focus on the project that I did for the exhibition at the University Hall Gallery. Before I start talking about that project, I want to also talk a little bit about my background and also my connection to Dorchester. I was born in Hong Kong when Hong Kong was still a British colony. I lived there till I finished high school, and then I came to the US for college. And I stay here after that. So in other words, I spent my whole adult life here. My parents and my siblings are still living in Hong Kong. My identity as an immigrant and a Hong Konger have influenced my practice and research interests a lot. And for the past 3 years, I started to make work that investigate the notion of home, a sense of belonging and sense of unbelonging. I think as an immigrant, I think home could be a complicated issues or complicated notions. We all have our reasons of why we settle in a place and call it home. The reason could be related to family history, heritage, economic situations, and also, of course, like political situations. Some people are very fortunate to have a home that they love, but other people having a good home is a privilege. So now I want to tell you all about my connection to Dorchester. I actually do not live in Dorchester. However, I started knowing a little bit more about Dorchester when I started having my art studio in Fuse Corner in 2011. At that time, my studio was part of Howard Art Project, which was a studio / gallery space that I co-founded with 5 other artists. Howard Art Project then became Dorchester Art Project in 2015, which is currently run by Brain Arts Organization. So for the past 9 years, Dorchester has been a place where my art projects are conceptualized and created. So these 2 pictures, the one on the right, it was taken during Open Studio, Dorchester Open Studio in 2012. I was doing a performance there. And then the one on the left, it was a picture of me doing a video shoot. So now I want to talk about the piece that I have in the gallery. The title of the piece is called Make a Wish for Dorchester. When Sam told me that he wanted to curate an exhibition that features Dorchester artists, I was very excited, and I thought I should use this opportunity to make a new piece that is specific to Dorchester. As I was thinking about what exactly I wanted to make, something that came to my mind was that I knew that I wanted to include human voices in the piece. In my own performance and video works, I use my own voice a lot, and this is when I started to realize the potentiality of using human voice as a component of an artwork. I'm very interested in the sonic quality of human voice and the unique way that we speak. For instance, I'm interested in the and the silence between sentences. To me, listening to someone sharing their stories and their opinions is a very intimate experience. It is also a very direct way to connect to people. I also think that speaking is very liberating and empowering. So with this interest in mind, I have decided to do a project that involves interviewing people who live, work, or study in Dorchester. In other words, people who have connection to Dorchester, because it is important to me that if this project is about Dorchester, the content has to come from people who have connected to this neighborhood. Then my next step was to come up with some questions to ask my interviewees. Even though the content of each conversation that I have with my interviewees were different, there were always questions that I asked. So for instance, I always ask my interviewees their connection to Dorchester. I then also ask them what home means to them, for the reason that I mentioned before, because it's a very important personal question for me to investigate. And another question that I ask is that I will ask my interviewee what community means to them, because in some ways I think community is an extension to home. Another question that I asked was that I asked my interviewees what they want to tell people who has no connection or who have never been to Dorchester about Dorchester. I feel that sometimes people have misconception about Dorchester because they just learn about Dorchester through the media, and sometimes these misconceptions are negative and do not reflect the reality. I always ended my interview by asking my interviewees to make a wish for Dorchester. I think making wishes allow us to reimagine and to reconsider a new reality. Making wishes also gives us hopes and motivation for making positive change. It's also allow us to think big and dream big. It is an ad when poetics meets politics. So with the time that I had, I was able to interview 12 people. Some of them are artists or musicians that I already know, such as Trent and Aiden. I've also interviewed, like, say, small business owners in Dorchester, such as the owner of the bodega that's like right across from my studio. I've interviewed a librarian who works at Fuse Corner Library, who also lived in Dorchester. I also have a chance to interview with students who goes to UMass Boston. So this image is the installation view of the piece. There's a pair of speakers that play the audio, sorry, the recording of the interviews. The whole duration of the audio is about 1 hour and 12 minutes. And on the left, you see a big wall drawing where I repeatedly write the wishes of some of the interviewees until I fill up like big portion of the wall. So this is like a detailed view of the wall drawing. I use pencil or graphite to do this piece because I think pencil is a very accessible and humble and inexpensive material. So I just want to read out some wishes that I actually wrote on the wall. So I would love if people who want to remain in Dorchester and who feel connected here were able to be here because of choice and not other circumstances. I think it's by Trent. I think Trent said that. Thank you, Trent. I wish there was more conversation between the members of the community. I want Dorchester to be more appreciated by everyone. I wish housing would stay affordable or become more affordable because it's currently rising at such a fast rate that's going to push some people out. To keep Dorchester the way it is, my wish to Dorchester is for people in our community to open up to each other and to connect to each other in order for us to support each other. Maybe more businesses, more people coming here, and I think if we have good businesses and good people, then it will attract more people in the area. I wish that Dorchester would stay diverse and Dorchester would become a destination. So as you can see, a lot of the wishes address gentrification and housing needs in Dorchester, which interestingly tie back to my question about home and the notion of home, even though sometimes like home doesn't have to be a physical space or physical structure. So so now what you see is a participatory component of this project. So on the right, there's a table, and on the table that is a book that I made. So I invite gallery visitors to write the wishes to make Dorchester a better neighborhood for them or for everyone. And when the exhibition is finished, my plan is to give the book to the UMass Boston University Library so that the book would be in the collection. One thing that I really hope to achieve in this project is that I want the voices and the writings of ordinary people to have a place in a major public institution, such as UMass Boston. So this is a picture of the the writings like inside a book. It reads like, my wish for Dorchester is for everyone to find their own way to be happy and content. My wish for Dorchester is less traffic. My wish for Dorchester is to continue to develop as a multicultural, diverse community where people find safety and security. Grow and there. My wish for Dorchester is a growing community. And then I have develop and come together. So to end my talk, I want to share a little bit about the recording that is played in the gallery. It is okay. So I hope it works.
Home is anywhere where I know a lot of people who feel like family. And I think I could make my home in a lot of places. I feel like I could move anywhere with my husband and feel like I was at home. But home is Dorchester probably for a long time because we know so many people here and we feel very connected to people. And I have a real warm feeling in Dorchester. I love the diversity of Fields Corner especially, and that's really rare in Boston. So I hope that can continue, and I hope people will invest in more affordable options for people. And I hope that more art gets made. I hope that more street art gets made in Fields Corner, and that more musicians and dancers will move here and more people can share things.
Maybe for people to stop being scared of like the stereotypes against Dorchester. Like when I first moved here, it was like a blank slate for me. I didn't know anything about the communities around here, but when I told people I live in Dorchester, they'd be like, "Oh, like isn't that dangerous? Like how do you like living there?" And I was just like, "Well, it's great. Like I haven't really encountered any bad people. Like the people around me are all great." And I don't know. I just feel like my wish would be to like for people to stop being scared, pretty much.
Why do? That's a very interesting question. I've lived in various places. I've had a number of different homes, and I'm not sure where home is. I think home, when we come down to it, maybe in our minds. I don't know if it's one physical location. I don't know if it could be one physical location. I think we have to be rooted in our minds, in our hearts, and in our emotions and perceptions, and that we take that with us wherever we momentarily reside.
Community, for me, that's kind of like extended family. That's like people that you see often and kind of you can like count on them, they can count on you, so that's kind of community for me. I would wish for more bikes. One wish. If I had to boil it down to one wish, I wish that there was more sort of community-led groups.
I think Dorchester is very unique. Just like if I go to vacation, I always want to go back here after I go away for 1 week. I think Dorchester is where I because I grew up here. I don't know if I grew up here for so long, I get used to the area, but I feel like there are so many things that I feel relaxing here. Like there's a lot of different restaurants and there's a lot of different activities that can go. If you want to go to a city, you can hop on the train and go to the city. You want to have nice food, you can go find nice food. And if you want to go to the park, I mean, there's a lot of amenities here. So, I mean, Dorchester, we have so many things to do, so you don't get bored. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. That's end my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I really loved hearing all those voices, and it was really wonderful to have that audio playing in the exhibition space throughout the course of the show. So why don't we transition to Aiden's talk, if you're all set, Aiden? Great.
Perfect, I got it. Are y'all seeing this? Do you see this
So
fine?
Yes.
Great. So my name's Aiden. Thank you for y'all for being here. I'm so excited to kind of share my life and my art practice with y'all. So before I want to start off with some background information about me and my family, and just in case there's some baby photos in here, as an advanced apology, if my presentation is doesn't match up to your standards. So this is me when I was very young. This is right before I came to America. This is me in Vietnam, as you can tell. Very sassy little child, very fashionable. And this is my whole family. To the left is my mom and my dad and me. And to the right is my cousins. Oh, sorry. I don't know why this got here. And then this is actually a photo of the day when I immigrated to America. So I immigrated to the US when I was only 4 years old, and my family and I immigrated to Dorchester, and we have called Dorchester our home for over 2 decades. I love Dorchester and have been repping my neighborhood way before it was cool, way before it was gentrified. And even though there are moments when, you know, I feel disconnected or isolated from Dorchester, I always consider Dorchester to be home. And I always say that you can get the Dorchester, you can get out of Dorchester, but you can never get the Dorchester out of you. This is me here in Boston. This is at Castle Island when I was very young. As you can tell, I'm the middle one, the very sassy one. This is me and my grandma and my little brother. My grandma is the woman of my life, the love of my life. So is my little brother. I think this is the very first home that we lived in when we moved to Dorchester. This is also me. To the left is in front of my house, and to the left is inside of our house. As you can tell, I wore a lot of feminine clothing, a lot of like very out there clothing. I was always very queer to the core of it, so I always loved it. Let's see. Oh, sorry about that. This is like weird. And then this is to the left is a photo of me sitting on the water or like the ocean of Castle Island. And to the right is a park that's right across from the Dunkin' Donuts from the Dorchester Avenue near Field's Corner. Just peeing on the streets, being a little rebel, as you know who I am. So anyways, I graduated here in Boston at Boston Latin Academy, class of 2011. And I went on to Pace University in New York, where I studied psychology and graduated from the class of 2015. And so it wasn't until I really got involved with the LGBTQ activism when I really started to make art, quote unquote art. I never considered myself to be an artist. And also being the millennial that I am, my chosen medium was digital design and collage. And so for me, art was pretty much like a means to an end. So I didn't make art as like a hobby or like as a passion. It was more of like art allowed me to create these like beautiful marketing materials, and it allowed me to bring people together to my events and bring everyone from all over the place into one place. So what I'm sharing with you right now is just kind of like an example of some of the artistic work that I was making in college. For me, this wasn't like, oh, you are creating art, but for me, it was like, you're creating something to bring people together. And so to the left, we did trips to Museum of Sex in New York. To the right, we did a BDSM Culture 101 class at Pace University. This was an LGBTQ prom that I created the flyer for. Here's Breaking the Silence Fair, and to the right is free HIV testing. As you can tell, a lot of these flyers are not very creative. They're not what you considered art, very much marketing materials, and that's what I started out as. It's just I learned digital design, and then I just created these marketing materials so that I can bring people to my event. And so I would say at the same time, I was very heavily in the New York nightlife and zine culture. And I used to be a personal assistant to Suzanne Barsh, a very prominent nightlife producer in New York. And the community that I was part of was very radical. And they taught me a lot about just not about life, but also about art as well. And so from them, I learned a lot about individuality and really how to be a rebel. Not just to be a rebel, but just to push the boundaries of what art means, push the boundaries of what people understand. And so in 2014, having all of the experiences, I wanted to focus my activism on the LGBTQ Vietnamese community, specifically in Vietnam. And so in 2014, I went back to the homeland for the first time since 1998 when I first moved to America, with the mission of finding my community. And so I put the quote here. So here you are, too foreign for home, too foreign for here, never enough for both. And it's found by the book Diaspora Blues. To be honest, I never read the book, but I very connected with this quote because I felt that here in America, and I was never felt like I was American enough. And when I was in Vietnam, I never felt like I was Vietnamese enough. Just to backtrack a little bit, and so like at this time when I was in New York, I was very heavily involved in New York nightlife. Actually, sorry. So during my first trip to Vietnam, it was a trip and it was a very unique experience for me because it was the very first time I'd been back to the home country. And it was maybe about, I would say 14, 15 years. And it really asked me to identify my identity as a queer Vietnamese American person who do have all these privileges, who was able to come to America. And so when I went back to Vietnam, I realized that in the States, I was this type of person, or my identities identified me as someone who was underprivileged or someone who was not seen as American, quote unquote, the white American. And at the same time, I realized that in Vietnam, I had the same privileges as a middle-class white person in America. But even though I was born in Vietnam, I was not thought as quote unquote Vietnamese. I was not part of the crew. And so for me, I was like, I'm not part of America. I'm not a part of Vietnam. So what's good? Like, who am I? And so for me, in my mind, it was just all very boggling. And I just didn't understand who I was, my relationship to my identity to this world. So anyways, during my time in Vietnam, when I went there in 2014, my goal was to find that community, to find that queer Vietnamese community. And so I started to realize when I was trying to find that community, that the community in Vietnam was very dispersed and very disconnected. And it was the same thing as in America and in the diaspora. And I felt like no one was talking to each other. And I felt that there was no platform for us to connect and build community. And even then, you know, I think even in the 21st century, when we do have Facebook and all the social media, I felt like there was no interactions, or there was no platform for those who was living in the homeland, which is Vietnam, and those who were living in the diaspora, either that be America and Europe and Australia. There was no conversation. We were not a community. We were just so isolated from each other. And so from that, like in collaboration with my best friend New, we co-founded a publication called Vanguard, which is an international publication that seeks to connect LGBTQ Vietnamese community around the world. And our fifth issue had maybe only about 5 artists, including ourselves. So, you know, me and New, and then 3 other artists. But regardless of that, I felt such a connection to this work that we were doing. And, you know, for me, it was about community. And I think at the end of the day, I just wanted someone or some sort of community that I can connect to. And this is what I felt like I was building. And so I was so connected to this work and to this mission that after 2 years in college, I graduated in 2015. I spent 2 years in Vietnam to continue the work with Vanguard. So that was 2016, 2017. These are just some of the works that I've created in the past. This is from 2014 when we hand created everything. This is me just hand sewing some of the pages that we created with Vanguard. This is what the actual Vanguard 4 looks like. So once again, this is all handmade. This is also a handmade version of it. Great. So currently we have about 5 issues. For the 4th issue, we created everything by handmade. For the 5th issue, we are continuing on with a very digital focus medium, just in response to what we're dealing with now. And we're proud to say that we have about 500 members around the world. So these are 500 people who are LGBTQ and Vietnamese, a very niche community. So we are very proud to be able to jumpstart that community and be able to create a platform to connect people. And just, I would say, funny enough, like for a couple of amateurs like me and New who do not have a background in art, I don't have a background in art, I didn't study art at all. It's pretty funny that, you know, for a couple of amateurs who really love like cutting things up and just posting, like piecing things together, that we do have this long list of accomplishments that, you know, throughout the past few years that we're very proud of. And so some things that we are very proud of is we've spoken at the US Consulate in Saigon about our LGBTQ Vietnamese activism. Our zine have actually been archived at the Library of Congress. We've exhibited in galleries all around the world, in Vietnam, in the US here, in Australia, in Europe. And also we've been included in a lot of research and anthology, and we realize that our work is very at the forefront of LGBTQ activism in the Vietnamese community. And so these are just some of the kind of the artwork that we've been creating. And so having been in Vietnam for over 2 years, I returned back to Vietnam at the end of 2014, or actually 2017. And at this time, it was at the time when, you know, I had been gone away from living in Dorchester for over 6 years. You know, I was in New York at the time for 4 years in college. And then after that, I was in Vietnam for 2 years. And so moving back to Dorchester in 2017 was very weird for me. I was a completely different person. I was like, I don't really understand the neighborhood anymore. I don't really understand how my relationship with the neighborhood connect anymore. And so I had grown in such a way that was unimaginable to the people that lived here. And I was pretty much a stranger to my own neighborhood. And so my idea was that now that I'm here and now that I'm such a stranger, my strategy was to create something that was like a homecoming. And so my best friend and I had produced Vanguard 5 retrospective exhibition at the Dorchester Art Project that Joanna talked a little bit about. And we were able to bring together the LGBTQ Vietnamese community that we had established over the past 5 years and bring their artwork under one roof at the same time. And so we were able to bring hundreds of people to this small space and just over 30 artists under one roof. And these artists were represented both in like Australia, Europe, and Vietnam, here in Vietnam, across the coast. And so we were very proud of that. And these are some of the photos from the exhibition itself. And you can see from here that the way that we curate our exhibition is very unconventional. You can tell that the paper here or the art print from here is literally ripped by hand, or it's a very raw edge. And so the way that we curate things or the way that we do art is very unconventional, and we want to go above and beyond. Here's what I like to consider like my little princess corner. It was just a lot of artwork that I thought was a little very cute, very, very kawaii, and so I put them all together at once. Yeah, so what you're looking at now is the actual content of the Vanguard 5, the 5th issue. So for the Vanguard 4, what we did is we hand curated everything. So what we did is we brought together the community, and physically we hand created every single zine. And what you saw from these issues over here is that these were all handmade. So literally nothing was made online. We cut things out, we paste them together, and then we created these zines. And what we did was we photocopied things and we uploaded online. But for these ones, these were from the 5th issue, where we thought, you know, we wanted to push the boundaries of art. We wanted to kind of reimagine what it means to be DIY, what it means to be cut and paste. And so the way that I had designed the Vanguard issue number 5 is very much a mystery between is this like hand cut and paste and scan, or was this created on Photoshop? So we were trying to create that illusion of it as if it was digital or in person. And so from here, you can tell the background we created with cut and paste, and then for the words, we handwrite them, but also at the same time, we use Photoshop to make it look so perfect. Same thing here. The artwork in the pieces of furniture here or in the frame was separate from the actual piece. And so as a collaboration between me, myself, and the artist, I transformed the artwork into pieces of furniture and artwork. This is from votive paper, where you burn in Asian cultures for the dead. I use that as a background. And then this is just for our Vanguard 6. So we are working on the 6th issue at the moment. And so as we're recognizing, you know, what is happening in the world, what is happening with the COVID-19 situation, we also realize a lot of the work that is happening is going to be virtual. We realize that the way that we're going to be connecting with community is going to be virtual. And so for us, our plan for the Vanguard 6 issue is that we're going to bring everything online, whether it be creating an online exhibition or whether that be creating some sort of online virtual experience. But just to show you a little bit, this is what our open call looks like at the moment. So we are, one thing that we are very proud of for our 6th issue is that since we are accepting things online, we're able to accept things that are sound pieces and visual art that we were not able to accept in the past due to our limitation of printing. And so since everything is going to be online now, we're able to play people's music, we're able to play people's GIFs, or just, you know, animation that they think is fun, something that we were not able to accommodate in our past issues. So one question that I leave it to all of you is Edith an artist? So my question is pretty much sure. You can consider myself an artist, but I have not considered myself an artist until this year, actually, 2020, beginning of this year. And the reason why is because I've always considered myself to be a designer, a curator, and an organizer. I never considered myself an artist because I've never considered myself to put into that time and that effort to create original art. And for me, I'm finally realizing that connecting people is an art form. And so that's how I feel good about myself calling myself an artist, because I'm connecting people together, connecting people within my organization, within my community to do something amazing. And so I do want to end my presentation with a quote from Max Ernst, who was at the forefront of surrealism. And I feel like that also summarizes my work very well. And I'll read it out to you. And it's that collage is the noble conquest of the irrational, the coupling of two realities, irreconcilable in appearance upon a plane which apparently does not suit them. So for me, I'm Vietnamese, I'm American, I'm queer, I'm here in America, I'm here in Vietnam. And so a lot of my identity do not fit in. And so a lot of the work that I do, I try to bring all these weird things together to be like, does it make sense? Can we live in this world? Like, does this world create a space for us to live in it? And so I hope what you get from this is that there is no specific way to live in life, even though it doesn't feel like you fit in. It's about what you do in regards to it. So for me, it's about bringing people together regardless of how they are, regardless of how nature or how people regard them to be. And so with Vanguard, this is exactly what I want to do. I just want to bring people together regardless of who you are, and I want to see magic happens as it is. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Aiden. I really loved especially that that quote at the end in the metaphor that you're using, thinking about just collage as the metaphor for also like how our communities are formed. You know, and I think it's just very poignant. So thank you all so much for your talks. There was a lot of information in there, and I know we had a little bit of conversation going on in the chats alongside the presentations. I'm going to open up the Q&A now, but I know that that Dr. Lee had a few questions that I think if you're available now,
Yeah.
Professor Lee, that maybe you can address all of the artists and they can kind of answer as they see fit.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for your amazing work with the community and discussing many of the topics, like I've said, that we have interwoven in the Asian American Studies program, as well as in our particular class. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I know a couple of you have touched upon this, and I think it would be hard to not address this, but as a result of COVID-19, I'm wondering, like, you know, there's been a rise of anti-Asian racism. What do you think the roles of artists are during this time? And I know I haven't really shared this question in advance, but I think it would be hard to not kind of bring this up. You know, the role of social distancing. Aiden, I know you just talked about how you're expanding design in thinking about the use of the virtual platform. How does that work? How, you know, with what's going on right now, if any of you would want to expand more or talk to you know, the rise of anti-Asian racism and, you know, COVID-19.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, I can start. I think it's a great question, and it's something I've been pondering with. I mean, I think the role of artists, I mean, I think of not even just during a crisis, but just throughout, you know, I mean, I see the role of art and of artists as creating possibilities of disruptions, of really questioning and really reimagining. I mean, I see just amazing work that are being kind of created during this period, but then also just even questioning things that we know. And I think from, you know, reimagining how we, you know, come together, you know, in spaces, how we meet virtually, to really highlighting the disparity that's happening in our society and world, and what action needs, you know, to get done. So even though with that kind of the connection between art and activism, and art and, you know, present and future, but I always see kind of the role of the artist as seeing possibilities to life and to humanity. And I think especially in this very moment where things are so heightened, and I think people are looking for ways, I mean, when we're for us who are fortunate to be inside in quarantine, where people are consuming art left and right, whether it's like, you know, binge watching TV or thinking around art as a form of escape, as a form of, you know, how do we cope kind of through these really hard and challenging times, and that we look for ways to heal, to come together in different ways.
Thank you, Tran. Does anyone, Joanna or Aiden, would you like to add to that? Or in what ways have you, like, what do you think the roles of artists are during this time?
I think just like what Tran said, I think art like allows us to imagine and reimagine the impossibility. And I think it's a time that I think while a lot of us are engaging virtually, like through the internet, I think there are, I'm also thinking that as artists, we can like also find other ways to connect people that doesn't involve technology, because first of all, not everyone have access to technology. And also maybe it is time for us to use art to embrace simplicity and think about how we treasure simple things. And as a art teacher myself, I'm very fortunate that I have like my students are like, I've seen my I'm witnessing my students to still be able to make art, even though during this crisis, and a lot of them like tell me that like making art make them calm. And also for other people, for other students, they use this time to make art that reflect the new reality that we're in.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, I would also add that, you know, like as the queer Vietnamese community that I was talking about, we're very dispersed around the world. And so the way that we connect together has always been virtual. And so this is not something that's new to us, but rather it's more for us to expand and grow on that medium of like, how do we connect to each other virtually, whether it be through a shared zine or a shared publication? Do we create some sort of online programming? That's yet to be seen, but I think overall, I think this is really pushing us to really connect to one another and not have any excuse to be like, oh yeah, we're not in physical proximity to each other anymore, but we do have all these resources. And so I think community building moving forward is going to be huge in terms of, you know, how do we utilize the resources that we have, and how do we be creative in how we connect it to others. Even right now, you know, I'm trying to connect with people, either it be through phone call, through texting, to FaceTime. And for me, to be honest, I'm not a very virtual person, so it's tough for me. But I think I've always been, you know, an advocate of like, either you are part of the movement, or you get left behind. And I tend to be like, yes, I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna try to adjust to whatever is happening so that I can be part of the movement, because, you know, it sucks to be left behind. It sucks to not understand what's going on with the world.
Thank you. If Sam, I have a couple more questions. If and you know, jump in there if you want to. I know you have some questions as well. I think all of you have kind of talked about, you know, the role of gender identity, and your and you know, the community. I'm just wondering, like, you know, what can the community, like Dorchester and maybe beyond, do to better support artists and activists such as yourselves? Like, you know, when you're out in the community, you're doing the work, you know, what can we do on this end to better support you all?
I guess I'll start. So I guess this is something that I'm gonna pick up from Sam as well. So, you know, as we are in this pandemic, as we are in this terrible time, who do we look towards to? We look towards artists, those who are creating movies, films, music, you know, all this amazing visual artwork, all this auditory artwork to get us through this terrible time. And so for me, it's just like, that's just what we need to get to, like at the core of it. artists are contributing to the community in such a way that we are not appreciating. And so for me, I guess for my community, what would be helpful is just to appreciate who we are as people, to appreciate artists for who they are and not to downsize it. I know a lot of those in the Vietnamese community do not appreciate artwork as an actual form of work or as an actual form of contributing to the community. That's something that I get from my family all the time. They don't think what I do has any impact on the world. And so I think it just, at the end of the day, showing that, yes, you appreciate the work that's being put into the world. And yes, like this is actual work, you know, creative work is actual work. Creative work does not take, you know, it is not below physical work. Creative work is the same as physical work.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo, I mean, I don't think it's just in the Vietnamese community, but I think just even the value of art and culture in our society. And I think, I mean, that, you know, short and, you know, the easy thing is definitely support artists, you know, pay artists, don't expect free work. I think support, events, whether it's virtual or different ways to really have artists have a more sustainable, I think, practice. I think whether it's, supporting events, tickets, even gift cards, even things that are happening, I think, locally too. I mean, I don't want it to be like, oh, artists is like a special group of people, and it kind of in the way that I said earlier. I mean, I think everyone is an artist, is whether or not we use our creativity. Of course, there are people that, for a living make art and that's part of kind of their practice. But I think in different ways, people have so many skills, different skill set, creative skill set that they're contributing and creating. And so it's not so much to spotlight or to elevate certain people, but I think to really, question our value of art and whether art that are of value are in, special gallery or at a museum, but even in everyday community members who are creating public art, who are, creating music that, is a cultural or like traditional. So different ways how art is of value and how we can support all of each other in forms of engagement. And so, definitely in the meantime, creative kind of cultural work, support artists, make sure people are, are paid accordingly to, and are compensated, I think, and definitely really, really valuing that and not just expecting things just to happen. But I think a lot of kind of legwork and logistics, things kind of behind the scene, and people who are a part of, making art possible.
Yeah, I agree with what Trent and Aiden said, and I guess another thing that I wanted to add specifically is I hope, we get more support from the government. And yeah, this country is one of the very few countries that art is not funded by public funding. And I think I understand that it is, there are needs for every sectors in the society right now, but in general, I think public funding is important. And another thing that I want to say, this may not be addressed to directly what Chu's questions, but I just want to remind or say something that I want. Cultural capital could be real capital. The cultural capital, even though it may not directly translate to money, but I think cultural capital has power. So I think it's important that we all creative people remember this.
Super, thank you so much. And before I ask my last question and throw it back to you, Sam, I do want to ask my students and attendees, if you have any questions. Oh, okay. Please write them in a chat. Here's one right here from Rachel Machi. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. I apologize otherwise. What inspires you the most? I don't know if someone wants to answer that.
I can start off. So I would say that what inspires me the most, or what makes me feel good, best about my art, is that as long as I can change one person's life, I feel good about it. I think as artists and as activists, we want to change the world, but I think from just my personal experience, if I'm able to help out one person, I feel good as an artist, good as an activist, or else I just feel there's too much pressure put on me to change the world. And I would say like what inspires me the most is just like being able to be surrounded by people who are trying to make a change. I think if you are trying to be an artist or if you are trying to be an activist of some sort, just be surrounded by people who are so motivated and passionate about what they're doing. There's nothing more motivating or there's nothing more inspirational than being around the same type of people who are trying to do the same work that you're doing. And so this is why I'm able to do things, you know, up until 2020 is because I'm surrounded by myself with the same people who feel passionate about what I'm doing. And I wake up every day feeling good that there's another person who's pretty much a partner in crime who's trying to do the same type of work that I'm doing, and I'm not so alone in this work. And when there is moment for celebration and when there's moment, you know, to celebrate those moments where we have accomplished something, there's more than just you. There's you and your whole community. And I think it's basically just having your community, having your people be there with you as you're engaging in this journey.
Does anyone, Joanna or Tran, do you want to add to that, or?
I mean, it's tricky. I mean, I think in moments like this, I think seeing kindness, little acts of kindness definitely is just like really giving me a lot of hope and inspiration. Seeing like, you know, the little library that, you know, neighbors are putting like essential supplies and helping each other, being able to like, you know, check on your neighbors. And then even I think in ways that people are, you know, disrupting their own patterns, that, you know, doing things that they're not used to and really questioning certain rules or certain protocols that are put in place. Like, why is that? When I see, you know, things that people are making shifts that they normally wouldn't, I think that's super exciting. And I think that's part of, you know, in thinking around what is normalized, you know, and what is accepted in our society. So I think in ways like that, I think really breaking our own patterns of why we think, you know, the way we do and why do we accept certain things. I find that really exciting when I see, you know, shifts like that.
Joanna, I don't know if you want to add to that.
What inspires me the most, I think, as an artist, I make art that that I hope people, I want to make people think. That is like one of the reasons why I make art. But at the same time, I mean, I want to like thank what Tran just said, like about like during this time, I think like act of kindness is so important, like understanding and empathy. I think, I mean, as artists or as a human being, this is the time that we should show this act of kindness and empathy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have another question from Vlad. He asks, what obstacles did you face throughout your journey? And you can speak to that. I don't know who wants to start. Aiden, you're smiling over there.
Pointing to whoever is on this side or that side.
For me, it's over here. So I don't know how people are having it. Do you want to start?
Okay, sure, I'll start. I would give you like I guess a very specific, obstacle is that when I was working in Vietnam with Vanguard, is that with the publication in Vietnam, we do have a censorship department there, and all types of media, including films and publication, are very much regulated and under censorship. And so what we were doing was pretty much illegal. We were publishing pieces of work. We didn't ask for permission from the government. And so a specific obstacle that we faced was that we were very scared of being shut down at any time. Me being a Vietnamese American person, I do have citizenship in Vietnam and America. I was scared that I was either going to be kicked out of Vietnam or going to be kept in Vietnam and denied my American rights. And so I think the work that I do, there is that element of danger, that element of just not knowing what's going to happen. This also is the same thing with another project that I do. I'm also the founder of Korea Vietnamese Film Festival. And so I think just overall being able to you know, put this work out there and have your name on it is just so scary, because you never know when it's going to come back to you. You never know if you're going to get banned from the country. You never know if you're going to get kicked out of the country. And I love Vietnam. I would hate to be kicked out of Vietnam. And so I think for me, just risking that relationship to my home country is an obstacle.
It looks like we have another question too from Wen Tai Sen. And they write, after the crisis, now that we are doing more with the virtual world, can you imagine a change in the way art is used as an expression? That's definitely something that's on my mind these days as an arts administrator.
Yeah, hi Wenty, great question. It's just like, I feel like it's very layered, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, just even art in the, you know, the digital realm that we're in, you know, digital age. You see the commercials, you see corporations that are trying to engage with consumer, even like how we are ordering things, you know, through companies that are being delivered. I'm just thinking just ways of mass production. And I wonder if, like, you know, in little ways, you know, the mom and pop shops or like artisans or, you know, are returning, or the value of handmade, you know, like even with mass, you know, seeing like ways that, you know, are things that, you know, being created. I think I find like, you know, that's really inspiring. But at the same time, we still live in a, you know, very capitalistic society where the value of production and the cost, and we're seeing that, you know, right now with workers and everything, and even like, you know, thinking around ways that different type of art is valued too. Do we value still like art that are by certain names, or that are spotlighted in certain, you know, places too, or the recognition of new ideas of that can be kind of welcome into, you know, the canon, or that can be embraced in different ways, and that art that are told by the lived experience and of the people themselves, and that there's more equity in art, and ways that art can be more accessible. Those are, I think, ways that I think right now things are, I think, being challenged, and you know, it's exciting, but definitely not, you know, hopefully more of that is happening. Even the ways, I think, even philanthropy, especially when I know Johanna brought about kind of like government support, but even relief funds and like philanthropy and ways to what is supported and what's not, and what, you know, and the loosening of protocols and of guidelines, you know, and like funding. I think that answer even to the question of what's the most challenge. I mean, funding support sustainability, I think, and it's also what is valued over something else.
And also, I think that in terms of like the art that we make, I think right now, because like a lot of us has to be like, I mean, it's hard for us to go out, or many of us may not have the resources to buy extra art materials. So I can imagine that like we, like as artists, we will start like using more and more materials that we already have at hand, or like at home, like some domestic materials that we find at home, or like reused materials, which I think is a good thing. It's something that we should, I think is a positive thing. Mm-hmm.
So Joanna, I think that's it's a good segue, because actually for my class, my students are, their final project is a creative expression. Of course, you know, we're self-isolating, we're at home. So I'm excited to see what they produce in terms of their creative expression, and if they do are using some type of, you know, visual art or whatever, what type of home materials that they're using. And so that brings me to my last question before I throw it back to you, Sam. Like, for people who are interested in becoming interested in arts, or becoming involved and wanting to support artists and activists, like what can they do? Like what was your first step in, you know, kind of taking that leap, so to say? I think especially Aiden, because you didn't take a really traditional route in terms of, like, you know, going to an art program. You know, what are some advice that you might give to students or anyone who's who are attending tonight, and how they might want to begin, being an artist, right?
Yeah, of course. So I'm just gonna say I was not born an artist. I was not trained as an artist. I don't have any background as an artist. And so the things that I do are pretty much things that I have researched on YouTube, went to just like found tutorials. And the way that I found or come to terms as myself and as an artist is because I am very much experimental. And I think it takes a lot to be an experimental artist. Like if you choose to be an experimental artist, you're like in your class of it, like you're in your own class. And so the things that I do is I just found a lot of textures in my house. And the way that my art practice works is I find texture or I put things together and then I scan them onto, like a printer. And it looks very different than how it looks in person. And so for me, it's not about, if there's any technique or if there's anything, that's definite. For me, it's all about experimentation and it's all about just trying things out. There's so many things that I have tried things out that have become actual trends in design that I've noticed. Like there are things like that I created with, tinfoil, or things I've created with different materials like sandpaper that I've started to see a trend from artists in Vietnam, people all around the world that are starting to use the same materials. And I think at the end of the day, just try to have fun with it. For me, it's about just touching things and experimenting with things. But for you, it could be a very visual things. It could be colors. You just need to define, what stimulates you as an artist. For me, it's about textures. I use really weird textures all the time. If for you, it's color. For you, it could be just like how things are positioned, the lines to things. So what I would recommend is just try things out. And I would also say, if you are scared to, like one thing that I find that artists have is like being scared to create this one piece of art and that's going to be your one masterpiece. Like I forgot what it's called, but pretty much like what you are creating is not going to be your only piece of art. It's not your masterpiece. It's not going to be, the one thing that's going to define you. Just keep creating. And I'm gonna be honest, where, with the zines that I've created, with the masterpieces that I've created, there have been a billion other shitty things that I've made. And I would never show anybody. But at the same time, it's like, this is part of the journey. This is part of growth. No one is born an artist. I was not born an artist. And so it's all try and error. And I would say, just start somewhere, do something, what makes you happy. And I know it's hard to say, but don't look at other artists. I did not start this journey with other artists. I was like, fuck artists. I was like, I hate art. I hate mainstream art. And then all of a sudden, here I am, part of mainstream art. And so it's very funny that, just start somewhere. Just don't care about what other people are doing. Start somewhere. Do something for yourself. Be happy in your own practice.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice on like the keep creating. My theory on just talent and art, I think it's like nature versus nurture, I mean, I think there are people who are born with certain, ability, but then there are ways that you can nurture that. I mean, I think the practice of it, I totally relate into like the perfectionism, of like holding such standard, and then it blocks your inability to create or to continue. And I think, that definitely, I think, really keep creating, be true to yourself, seek your kind of own curiosity. I think the idea of, even self-censorship, that happens in spaces, even of course, certain audiences, certain, kind of spaces too. But I think as much as you can really, create art, for yourself, even for others, ways that, so that you're able to, create. And there's definitely ebbs and flows. I don't think, whether or not you want to, be like a, you want to make art as part of your living or even just art as a hobby. But I think the practice of, creating, I went to art school, art quote, and sometimes that spaces can also kill your creativity too, just with like protocols, certain guidelines of how art is supposed to be a certain way. But I think, be true to yourself and kind of what you value, and kind of seeking that kind of curiosity and that part of just, continuing to create art. And it definitely has this ebbs and flows and waves.
And Another advice that I have is that don't wait for a fancy gallery to give you an exhibition. Like start, like show you, I mean, with social media, there's like share your work like on social media, or like have exhibition at your apartment and invite your friends. So I don't think we need to depend on big art institution.
Thank
Don't
you
wait.
so much.
Yeah, don't wait.
I love your, your advice, and I think, being able to promote yourself, right? You have to be a self-promoter, and I love that idea. So Sam, I think did you have a couple questions, or did you want to take a poll? And
I think we'll go on for maybe like another 10 minutes if that's okay with everybody. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't planning on asking this question, but just from the flow of the conversation, a few things that people brought up. I was really interested in, Aiden, what you were saying about just the nature of communication throughout, like, just for example, like the Vietnamese diaspora, and it having to just through necessity be a virtual connection, which is obviously something that we're all, everyone around the world is now being thrown into due to like just this idea around social distancing. And I was wondering if each of you could speak a little bit about just what we can all learn from just the, knowledge shared throughout the immigrant experience. My wife is actually an immigrant from Brazil, and I've noticed that just through her network of people that she's been able to rely on is that there's a huge amount of generosity and adaptation and innovation in terms of being able to just survive and thrive. So I was wondering, there's a lot of that throughout all of your artworks. Like Magda Fernandez in the chats mentioned that all these projects are really generous, which I think is incredibly true, and it's great observation. So I was wondering if each of you could speak to that a little bit, just about just knowledge that you've gained from your families, from your own experiences, and what that can possibly teach, the world in this moment.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start off. I would say even just the timing of it, like there are times when I'm talking to people in Vietnam where time zones are completely different off. And so you got to make adjustments, both to yourself, the other person got to make adjustments. And at the end of the day, connection is just about making adjustments, making compromises so that you can meet the other person where they're at and they can meet you where they're at. And it's the same thing with when I'm making art, there can be days where I'm like waiting weeks upon weeks to wait for someone to answer. That can just be one example of just how connection can delay a process in some way. And just like me talking to people across the world, it's not really continual. I think when we talk about communication, it's like continual, like, yeah, it's a back and forth and it's like very quick. But for me, it's about like emailing, waiting for like a pen pal, quote unquote, a pen pal, like waiting for days or weeks for someone to respond. And I think that's really what we gotta go back to is we should look at the communication or some sort of interaction with people as not a granted thing for yourself. As artists, I think we need to look at those things as something special nowadays. Like artists are probably, under immense stress, and when they are answering you or when they are interacting with you or collaborating with you, this is probably some huge, opportunity for them to engage with the world or to move forward with their artwork. So I think just in terms of connecting with people, I think you got to really truly understand where you're at as a person, where the other person is at the moment, where the world is at. And I think at the end of the day, just be very forgiving of who you are and forgiving of who the other person is. And it could take forever for you guys to set up any sort of collaboration. I would tell you, it could take a year for me to be in communication with someone to actually move forward with a collaboration. And so, just take your time, be forgiving of people, be patient with people, because communication in this time and age is very difficult as everyone is adjusting to technology. I'm very comfortable with technology. I would feel like my community is very comfortable with technology, but a lot of people that I know who are artists now, who are, experiencing this isolation from COVID-19 is having a hard time. And I think for me, it's about being patient with them as well, as I'm also transitioning to this.
I mean, I think the power of, the immigrant and refugee experience is of resiliency and of adaptation. I think anyone who can identify with that experience know kind of the hustle, the adaptation, when you're moving between society, between cultures, and really thinking about ways where you have to be flexible and figure out something even when there are not exact guidelines or even support system around you. I mean, I find it so powerful because even, during this period, people, I see how people respond to certain kind of situation and scenario. And oftentimes when it's someone who's an immigrant or a refugee or a person of color who've been through, hardship, it's like, I know that in a weird way, I was like, I think they'll be okay because they've kind of been through this before. And versus people who haven't been in that situation, they respond so differently. And so I that's why I see really the power of just, the adaptation. And I talked to, my parents and my dad, been through the war and was in internment camps after. He was like, quarantine, this is nothing. He's like, I've lived through the worst. I didn't have barely any food. So he's like, you'll be fine. Just stay home. Just like make it work. It's just like thinking about like the hardship of what communities and families have gone through and seeing the ways that people are flexible and adaptable. And I was joking around just like the idea of like hoarding, of just like, I feel like so many refugee family, that's like the mentality. So it's just like everyone, when you go, you're buying, you're constantly in that kind of mode of like, you have to be prepared. And so I think a lot of that translate into this idea of like, of just always being, knowing that you have, you have to make it work somehow, even, when you don't have your finances together, even when you don't know what's going to happen. It's like, you kind of have that resiliency built in. And so I find a lot of that really, both inspiring, but also powerful, but then also thinking around why is it that, certain people have to go through that again and again, and that kind of, that build up, but then thinking about ways that in these times, it can also be that extra layer of like, they know how to, fall back or rely on certain ways that's already built into their experience.
Another thing, and I think what Aiden just said about connectivity, what that made me think about when COVID-19 wasn't a big thing in this country, because it started like in Asia. I mean, it's like it started earlier in Asia, in say, for instance, in Hong Kong. So like I remember in like early January, my friends in Hong Kong, all my family asked me to buy like masks from here and send it to them because they couldn't find any in Hong Kong. And then, but right now, starting in March, while the supplies in Hong Kong has stabilized, like I told my friends in Hong Kong that, hey, the hospital workers in here don't have they don't have enough PPE. Can you send me some supplies? And then so my friends in Hong Kong then ship me a lot of masks and surgical gloves, and then so that I can give them to the hospitals here. So yeah, so I think connectivity can translate to real action sometimes.
So it looks like there's another question, and then maybe this might be a good way to kind of wrap up our talk tonight. There's a question from Vovo, and I think this touches upon the intergenerational topics that I think maybe each of you have addressed in your work. And the question is, they're asking about the chasm between the construction of art as an industry in this country, as opposed to an Eastern understanding of art. And Aiden, you had responded, and I don't really want to add and expand more to that, Aiden, was that you said that your parents hated that you make art. So
yeah, I was just responding to their original question around what their families thought about them choosing their experiences as an artist. For me, my parents hate that I'm an artist. I don't think they like that I make art. I don't think they like that I spend my time on art, because I would say that it's not very productive. I think in the Vietnamese immigrant community, it's all about productivity and capitalism and how much you can produce. And so for me, like, art produces nothing for my family. And so there's no money, there's no actual thing that's being produced. And so they don't like it. And so for me, it's a lot of negotiation between, I'm still a part of the family. I'm still the firstborn son. There's still a lot of responsibility for me, regardless if I identify as queer, regardless if I don't want to be the firstborn son. I think just in Asian families, there's a lot of negotiations. Like, there are a lot of things that you need to do, even if you don't like it. And it's part of the family function. It's just part of, you know, honor. Sometimes for me, it's all about honor, being the firstborn son. And so for me, I'm able to do art because I'm able to have a actual job, a full-time job that pays money, that can alleviate some of like my family's worries about me as an adult. And so only can I do art when I'm able to accomplish all these other things that my family has set out for me, whether that be having a family, having a full-time job, having stability, having housing of some sort. Art has always been a second priority, and it will always be a second priority, and I understand that. And so for me, it's always just about how do I navigate that with my family to make them feel good so that I feel good as I approach my art practice.
I can relate to that, Aiden. I think definitely, being the only, identified artist in my family too. And I think that growing up in, the Southeast Asian kind of Asian American, but that idea of the obligation to the collective of the family, the unit. And I definitely understand why, not too many immigrant, or refugees, make a living off of art, because it's not practical in a capitalistic society and kind of in that sense. But actually the question when I was reading it, Vovo, I was thinking more about just even this idea of practicality. And I feel like I'm thinking of even like the introduction of like lacquer art, and it's so interesting because lacquer, like for example, lacquer art and like kind of the Eastern kind of art is like, it was really introduced to like furniture through everyday material. And I'm just thinking like very often when you enter like an Asian American household, an Asian family, do you see oftentimes art on the wall, but it's really embedded into really practical, even like chopstick, plates, even very furniture. And so thinking around, that's such a differentiation, I think, for the most part, not everywhere, with, a Western kind of art of sense of you go to the museum, there's like a painting, you like enjoy your garden, very, different, not saying like, but I think this idea of art oftentimes for, I think, Asian household is built into a very practical, kind of everyday item, which makes sense because that's, kind of what's of value, but I don't want to say it's like more or less, it's just a different conception of it. And I think, even this idea of making art for pleasure. And I think that proceeds if all your basic necessity are taken care of, then you do have that luxury of creating art just for pleasure. But for people who have to hustle, is a whole different, ways. I see that in the way of a lot of, immigrant restaurants, where oftentimes it's not, the aesthetic isn't very pleasing, because it's like, no, they have to hustle, they have to create this to make a living. So they don't, maybe the idea. And so I think in being trying to, a more forgiving way of how, families and community who, perhaps basic necessity aren't taken care of, the pleasure of art, I think is differently, conceptualized, as opposed to, thinking about the values too, of it.
And Joanna, did you have anything else that you'd like to add to that, or?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think that concludes our talks. I think that was a really beautiful way to round that out. Thank you so much for the question, Vovo, and for all the other participants. I really appreciate everyone's tuning into this. I want to thank Dr. Julie for bringing her class and for helping really fill out the context and questions and participation in the talks, as well as all of the artists. Again, Ngoc Tran Vu, Joanna Tam, and Kanye Nguyen, excuse me. And once again, thanks to all of our participants, to all of our funders, and I hope that we'll be able to produce more programming like this again in the future. Hopefully we'll be able to get back into the gallery space sooner rather than later, but until then we'll be putting together some more artist talks and more events quite like this. So thanks again everyone for participating.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sam, and Joanna, Aiden, and Tran. Such a privilege to be able to hear you speak about your art finally. Again, and thank you to Sam and the University Hall Gallery for co-sponsoring this event. And thank you students for attending. I'm, look forward to seeing you all for our final class next week. And yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing your handle for those who, maybe are participating by phone. If you're interested in, I think this is a recording. So Sam, if people are interested in watching the presentation, they could get in contact with myself or you, and we can make that happen. There's been social media handles that's been shared as well. So, follow them on social media. Here's, the gallery social media. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. This has been incredible. And I'm very privileged to be able to, listen and to your talk and visually see your work and hear your work. So thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. Well, from the University Hall Gallery and from our collaborators at the Asian American Studies program at UMass Boston, we're signing off. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Be well.
Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Love you.
Wait till your pictures.
Oh yeah, we should.
Are you taking a screenshot? You're taking a screenshot?
Wait, but I cannot do screenshot while I'm making this. Wait.
Let us know when so we can do the heart.
Yes.
3, 2, 1.
I'll do it too.
Bye. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Love you guys. Bye.